accused Prince Andrew and Epstein of SAing and trafficking her, Virginia Giuffre, has just allegedly unalived herself just a couple weeks after somebody hit her in a bus and doctors said she only has 3 days to live. Is anybody buying any of this? All right, let's dive in. This is gonna get crazy. So this sweet girl is Virginia when she was a teenager. Her story is that she went through abuse from a family friend, ran away from home, and then later was just trying to get her life together when she met Epstein. And Epstein decided to traffic her for several years. And one of those people famously, as we saw in that photo, was Prince Andrew. Now, she and several other women ended up suing Prince Andrew, who did settle out of court. And as a result, I believe he got stripped of several royal titles and had to step down from most of his duties. And now they're trying to kick him out of his royal homes, which is fantastic. But here's what gets crazier. Just a few weeks ago, she was in a bus crash where doctors said she had 3 days to live. And the internet picked it apart saying she was lying or it's a conspiracy theory. Let me dive in and show you. So this is the photo that she put up, and guys, this is what she had to say about the ordeal. March 30th, she said, "This year has been the worst start to a new year, but I won't bore anyone with the details. But I think it's important to note that when a school bus driver comes at you driving 110 kilometers as we were slowing for a turn, that no matter what your car is made of, might as well be a tin can. I've got into kidney renal failure. They've given me 4 days to live, transferring me to a specialist hospital in urology. I'm ready to go, just not until I see my babies one last time. But you know what they say about wishes, crap in one hand and wish in the other, and I guess it's still going to be crap at the end of the day. Thank you all for being wonderful people of the world and for being a great part of my life. God bless you all, Virginia." And that was the last time anybody heard from Virginia. So let me give you her story. So apparently she had been married for several years to a guy, had 3 kids. There was some type of domestic dispute. We don't fully know what's going on, but whatever it was, she was removed, couldn't see her children, had no contact with him. Now, from what she has said about the situation, apparently he had been abusive for a very long time. And I don't know, something transpired where it made it look like it was her. So that's the whole thing about not seeing the kids. There are some issues there. However, this is also, like I said, the photo she posted. And everybody said she is lying. Let's take a look at this photo. So if you see, she has bruising. But people said a few things. They're like, first of all, if you're dying in the hospital, why are you taking photos? Wouldn't you have the energy not to do that? Secondly, let's look. Looks like her hair looks okay-ish, and she's wearing jewelry. Why are you wearing jewelry and pearls if you're in the hospital? And people said the background didn't quite look like a hospital, and many people said that she was lying. Also, the media came out heavy and said, hey, we don't actually have any reports of a bus hitting anybody, and that made her look like she was lying. However, it came out a couple weeks later, there was a bus crash. Now, police had kind of gone back and forth and said, well, yeah, there was, but it's not the same story that she told us. And allegedly, even though she was going into renal failure, her family posted on her behalf and said, hey, just heads up, she got released 4 days ago. She's actually on the mend and doing better. And then all of a sudden, she's not here. Now, why is this weird? This is weird because 2 things are supposed to be released this year, and one was the RFK files, which we're getting more and more info of, and the Epstein files. As you know, since Epstein and all of that happened, we have very little information, the little black book. And apparently, he unalived himself in prison with all these crazy, mysterious circumstances and coincidences that don't really add up. So what's actually going on here? Let's see what her family says. This is the statement her family made. It said, "It's with utterly broken hearts that we announce that Virginia passed away last night at her farm in Western Australia." Her family said in a statement to NBC News, she lost her life to unaliving after being a lifelong victim of SA and S trafficking. Virginia was a fierce warrior in the fight against SA and S trafficking. She was the light that lifted so many survivors, the statement said. In the end, the toll of the abuse is so heavy that it became unbearable for Virginia to handle the weight. Now, let me give you a little context to her. She was the first vocally public accuser. In fact, she was the one that helped the others be able to come forward and tell their stories about what happened with Jeffrey Epstein. She is a huge piece of helping unravel all this and take this down. Now, I understand how this is painted as she has unalived herself. And let's be very fair. You guys know I like to examine every side of something on this channel. So let's look at how that could be. So it looks like there were issues at home. It looks like she has been a victim of SA and abuse and things like this her whole life. And towards the end, she came out and said she was even a victim to her husband. Now, whether or not that's true, some of that, like with her husband, I'm not here to debate that, but let's say this. Given her story and some of it we know, it's going to create mental health issues. This is not me putting her down, but I'm saying she went through so much. It's going to mess with your mind, if nothing else, from the trauma. So that makes perfect sense. So in certain ways, because of everything she's been through, what she recently went through, the bus crash, not being able to see her children, her talking about how that is the thing that's hurting her the most, it could make sense that she would do this. However, isn't the timing really suspect that we are about to have the Epstein files released and this happens? And apparently Prince Andrew has been trying to get back in the good graces of the royal family, get his properties back, and even get back to work and get his titles. So with all of that, and then suddenly with this year, all of that going to be released, there's a bus crash. Then the media says, no, there was no bus crash. And the media spun this narrative that she is lying because she's wearing some jewelry. And because if she's dying, how could she post a photo? And then it comes out quietly later, oh yeah, well, no, there was a bus crash, but it's not what she said. So let me tell you, as somebody with chronic health issues has spent a lot of time in doctors and hospitals and emergency rooms, there were times I took photos there and I was fighting for my life. And there is a thing where, especially if you are in really, really bad shape, there's almost a part of you that wants to give a goodbye or document it, which unfortunately that was her goodbye. That's the last time we heard from her. And guys, there were times that I was nicely looking and dressed up for whatever reason, and I went in the hospital looking pretty glammed up. So just because you're near that situation or you're in a bad situation doesn't mean you can't take that one last bit of energy to try to put something out into the world. I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm saying I've been in her shoes, not in those situations, but in my own with health, that I can understand that. I just find it interesting that she said she was about to not be here. Doctors told her that. All we heard from her family was, no, she's fine. She's okay. She's mending. And then suddenly she's gone, and also at her farm. Now, I believe her farm was the place where her husband and her kids were. She wasn't allowed to go, I think. So what farm are we referring to with this? And something else people might say. I've heard people say, well, she just claims abuse on everything. She must be faking or doing it for attention. As somebody who has been through abuse and been through all types of stuff, if you watched my channel, I am 40 years old. For the first time in my life, I am just now, over the last 2 or 3 years, in the first healthy relationship I've ever been in. Truly healthy relationship. The others had some forms of abuse. Some were lighter, some were more awful. And there were times where people said, well, you must be lying. Nobody could go through all of it. When you grow up in it, or when you have it inundated to you when you are young, your neural pathways in your brain form to see that is love, and you can't see it. And remember, guys, most people who do these things to you, they don't start out that way. They groom you first, even if they're not aware of it. They do those behaviors to get you comfortable and lock you in. My point in telling you all this is, I have tried to educate people on these subjects for a while. I am still uncovering what it did to me, how to attract the right people, the red flags I didn't see. Why couldn't I see them even as I'm 40? I'm just saying, just because that's the situation doesn't mean she's lying. Our brains, it takes a while to rewire it because we just can't see it. But I just can't help but think about the coincidences, and I don't know. I do know sometimes coincidences exist, but I also don't believe in them when there's just way too much circumstantial info. What do you guys think? Tell me your thoughts, sound off in the comments, click the plus sign, also subscribe. I'll have more on this. This is just stupid.